Good morning, Joe. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast.
Good morning.
And I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau. This is Joe Haytas. We're attorneys. We help eligible parolees work their way to being found suitable and released from lengthy life sentences in general, some other cases as well. And Joe Haytas wrote this book, 36 Strategies of Suitability, an inmate's guide to navigating the parole suitability process in California. He wrote this, oh man, I probably think 10 years ago or something, right?
2019.
Oh, 29. So 5 years ago. It's an excellent manual. It's not just logistical, it's logistical, and it's got a lot of great, for lack of a better word, insights into what it takes to be found suitable. And today is strategy 15. We are going to take a look at comprehensive risk assessment, a dress rehearsal for the suitability hearing. I love that. Love that chapter title. And his quote, because I love the quotes: "Your life is a rehearsal for the moment you are in now." Judith Molina. Don't know who's a Judith Molina.
I don't know.
Oh, you're just properly citing to the person who made the quote, and that's great. Okay.
Correct. I think she
what-
might be a writer or something.
Okay. Well, you wanted to give credit where credit was due, which is hard for a lot of people. And because most people are suffering from some sort of maladaptive personality style, is what we're supposed to call it now. We're not allowed to call it what it really is. And I won't go down my dark road today, but I might. You never know. You never know. You never know. This chapter is what it says, but it's going to explain about psychological evaluations and what they are used for in parole suitability hearings. I always describe it like it's number one, this is a forensic psychologist. It's not a treating psychologist that comes to visit our clients. It's a forensic psychologist. What does that word mean in a very simple way? Expert witness for the Board of Parole hearings that makes a report to be used by the panel during the hearing, just like any other, court case where psychologists are appointed to give opinions about certain things. Usually you get one for each side, but in this case, you get it one-sided. So, for instance, like if I have in a trial and my client I claim insanity. I'm just going to use something really out there. In an insanity, I get a psych. I have a right to have a psychological evaluation of my client to prove my defense, and the prosecutor has the right to examine my client for the rebuttal. And so that's typically in civil criminal cases. Everybody gets to be heard with their own witness of their own choosing. But in parole hearings, that's not the way it is. It's more akin to a probation officer's report, sort of that one-sidedness. It's used by the panel to get an idea, because they are providing an expert opinion on something that's outside the common person's knowledge. So the commissioners don't know how to diagnose people with antisocial personality disorder. Well, we probably do now, but technically that has to be done by an expert. We don't know how to figure out gathering from childhood and gathering from this and gathering from that, whether they pose a low, moderate, or high risk. Based on that meeting, obviously everything's left to argument, but it is a type of expert witness report. And that is what it's used for. It's a fact gathering, opinions are made. And like Joe sort of explains in this book, it's your first impression, right? So, but he suggests in this chapter that fine, that's fine. It is what it is. Go in there and use this to put your best foot forward, to show your best efforts that you have thus far up to through the process, and see how you are evaluated by that. So you're going to get, a low, moderate, high risk for, they call it violence, but violence is a nuanced word, which basically means reoffending, because a lot of people come back for crimes that are not violent. And like he says, you need to go into this and approach it seriously. Show up. You have a right not to show up, but your loved one should show up. In general, you don't do well if you don't show up, and you have a right not to show up, but there's just a strong bias on against that. And then, you need to be honest, and you really just want to show that you have done this deep dive. And I was thinking about this today and all the stuff that Joe and I have been talking about, and that is, how do you show all this insight? Do you have to have perfect insight and all that? Does it have to match perfectly? No. But most of us, if we are knowledgeable about the material that we're about to talk about with another person, if we've really done the work, we're passionate about it, we know it, we can study it. Like my husband, he can tell you inside and out about crypto. Anything you want to know, he can just tell you organically. There's no need to look at anything. Joe and I, we can talk about parole hearings, the process, what it takes, off the cuff. It's natural. And so it's the same thing. You want to go into this meeting with this organic approach, sharing what you know. You don't want to go in with a script. You don't want to go in memorizing stuff. You really do want to figure out, who am I? Where was I? What did I do? Really examining that. And you can't just do that over a surface level and then come in there and expect that they're going to be found to be a low risk. These it's just not like read a book. I read the book. No, you really need to work the books, study the books, go back and study it again. The same with the 12 steps, back to the 12 steps. We're always on the 12 steps around here. And it's just working the steps. It's like, well, I got a certificate for the 12 steps. Okay, that's great. But that's not what it's about. It's about working the steps every day. Works because you work it. You go into the meetings. You keep going to the meetings. And if you can't get a meeting, make a meeting. And that's perfectly acceptable. So let me turn it over to Joe, why you included this chapter. I mean, it's sort of obvious. And what am I missing? There is a lot of points in this book. Again, the stuff that we cover on the show is just the tip of the iceberg, because you really need to have this manual at your side. You need to be highlighting and marking the book, marking the sides. And as a loved one, if you are the loved one of an eligible parolee, you really should be, possibly working it together too. But you have a lot of points in here, Joe. You had some other stuff that I might not have mentioned. What is going on with this strategy?
Well, you explained it very well, especially the point about when you meet with them. The discussion has to be organic. And just to explain that a little bit further, that means that you have to internalize the concepts of self-help that directly relate to your past causative factors and character defects. And when you do that, like you said, it's not about getting a chrono. I mean, of course, That's the first step. It's a record of it or a certificate. Absolutely, you need that. But I know things aren't going to go well when we're meeting. And I said, did you take AANA? Yeah, I got a certificate. It was, I think it's from 2015. Oh, okay. So you did it in 2015. Okay, very good. Well, do you work the steps? How has it benefit you? Well, I can't quite remember. Well, you know what? That's
Because I
not going
worked
to
it
do
in
it.
2015.
I'm sorry?
Because they went to one group in 2015 for
Right,
6 weeks,
exactly.
16 weeks, and then one and done, and it's really important to go and work these steps every day.
Every day. It has to be part of your life now, you know? If you want the privilege to be granted parole, and it is, let's face it, it's a privilege, you know? Especially for some of these guys, who got like, 100 years to life or whatever. And, uh, you know, you gotta change. They talk about offender change, but I'm getting off the topic of the risk assessment and
No, no,
more.
it's all really important because one of that it's all really speaks to, point number 5 you made. You can't possibly give a truthful and accurate answer unless you understand the question number 1, and number 2, unless you've done the work.
Yeah, exactly. Because they know what. Okay, beforehand, the psychologist reviews everything about you. The probation officer's report, appellate decisions, police report, rules violation reports, mental health assessments, uh, criminal history transcripts, juvenile records, healthcare records, vocational, educational, programming and certificates, Franklin files. I mean, they have it. They have the whole 9 yards. And so they base the interview on the information they already have. And for those of you who do not go to the meeting with the psychologist, the review is based all on the C file. And I've never seen a meeting with a psychologist where you decline to meet with the psychologist. I've never seen that on paper where it went well. It's almost always high. The conclusion, if you don't meet with them, because they can't gauge where your head's at, what you've internalized, or more importantly, your understanding of causative factors, character defects, getting a sense of your remorse or insight. All that stuff goes out the window when you decline going to meet with a psychologist. So that says those are the things they're looking for. They want you to have insight, a sense of remorse, a sense of an internalization of your programming. Oh, and by the way, they also look at relapse prevention plans and parole plans. If you don't go, you can't tell them about your parole plans or even what you're thinking of doing, even if you don't have any kind of a transitional acceptance letter yet, which I'm still confused whether or not you need to have transitional housing. I hear differing things all the time. So I just tell
I
my
tell them,
clients,
you just got to bring them. I mean,
yeah,
the legal says don't worry, and yes, we're telling the commissioners you don't need it. I am slowly starting to see the commissioners come around, but man, if you need to mitigate, you really need to have that. And again, the forensic psychologist, it's like they've got a section, parole planning, doesn't
hmm
have transitional housing, doesn't have a plan for that. And I agree with you. It's too conflicting at this moment, but
hmm
also let's say that you've got everything going, well, no, let's go the opposite. Say you've got nothing going for yourself and you want to have a hearing. at a minimum, then make a viable, realistic parole plan, because the structured decision-making framework says aggravating, neutral, or mitigating. And how are you going to get to mitigating unless you present the plan? So for them to say
Bingo.
you don't need
Bingo.
it, then they
Yeah.
always fall in the neutral category. You really need to mitigate if you're walking in there mostly with a denial possibility. You want to minimize that denial period to 3 years. So I'm just thinking more preparation, more thought about what you're planning to do when you're released. I don't know if that's like yeah, I don't know why
Like
they're
a red
saying
herring.
that, because
I
it's
don't know
just
either.
I'm not going to tell my clients that unless I,
Mm.
for a developmentally disabled person or some other issue, so that
Sure.
I need to use that as an argument to advocate that you can't use that against them, and that
Right.
everything will be taken, because then they're going to say, "Oh, well, you've got mental health issues and you haven't made a plan for that."
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
what
yeah.
plan? And what plan? And this relapse prevention plan. You don't really need to type out relapse prevention plans. I am
What?
never going to say like anything like that to my clients. You better
No.
come in with the writings.
No, exactly. If you
I don't
tell them
trust
they
it.
don't need parole plans, that's akin to professional malpractice,
Well,
I
no,
think.
they don't have malpractice. It's the board, but the board comes in and says we don't need it. And then the commissioners come and say, I want it. So now what?
Well, yeah, you got to advise them the right way. And by the way, you hit the nail on the head when you brought up the structured decision-making framework. By the time it gets to that in the decision, they're going to say that, oh, well, you weren't preparing for the future before prison and you're not preparing now. So therefore, it's a nexus to a current risk of danger.
Whatever, if they don't like you, man, they are going to pick on you for everything to
Yeah.
justify the length of denial. And I'm not, in an abundance of caution, I'm
Hmm.
not buying it yet until I
Right.
see it across the board. But some of these old commissioners, not old, but like they've been around, tenured, I guess is a better word.
I know what you
They're
mean.
just they're hard to they bring in new stuff, and you can see, like, remember the structured decision-making framework came in, and they were slow to sort of gravitate over there, and then they gravitated over there, and they just don't move their marker. But I have some commissioners coming in now because they must have got some training, and they just focus in on the issue of the day. So if you
Yeah.
have a recent write-up, they're going to talk to you about your write-up, and
Oh,
that's it. So you better have some stuff in your file, because I've seen it where the deputy commissioner isn't even asking post conviction. They do not care. You could have
no.
all the writings in the world and all the chronos in the world from the self help stuff. And they're just going to say, yeah, but it's not sinking in, which is mostly true if you're still
Hmm.
getting write ups that are legitimately written up. I'm not talking about ones that may be fishy, but it's just you know be a suitable guy. Like, my suitable guys are very humble. They
Oh,
accept
yeah.
feedback. They want to change, they want to learn, they want to grow as people. They don't want to just say I know it all and I can just go with this and keep going. They want more. Even I walk into a meeting with someone who's super solid. I'm like, wow, you are doing great. What do you think about my program? What do you think about this? Last week I had some guy, he was really doing well. He came in with his whole packet,
Hmm.
and man, did his maladaptive personality traits get triggered that day when he gave me his letter of apology. And I said, it's okay. I wouldn't mind if it was a little bit more. And then we talked about it. But at first he reacted. And
Mm.
I'm like, okay, buddy, and he had a child sex abuse case, and they are typically extremely narcissistic. Very, it's sometimes quite latent, I think is latent. Does that mean not easily seen? I shouldn't use
Yeah,
the big words
it's
because
like
I don't know what
latent.
you mean.
I believe latent is it's in there, but it's dormant or something. I'm not a
Not
psychologist. That's my
not
understanding.
dormant, but I guess just not, they're not showing it to you unless they get triggered. And so,
Yeah, right.
and he went off. And then I had another guy come in and go, "What do you think of
Wait,
my,"
he went off in the hearing
he went off on me.
before the hearing?
No, in our meeting.
Yeah,
Well, because I said, yeah, I don't mind the letter of apology. I wouldn't mind if it was improved a little bit. You know, maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong, but he's like, well, I like my letter. That's it. I like it. No further discussion. Because
yeah, yeah. He doesn't. His mind was closed.
narcissistic personality disorder
Mhm.
cannot accept input or feedback. And so it's very tricky to do that. And then I had another guy. Um, I just had 5 guys in a row that were really not on the ball, and they were all extremely, I'm not supposed to diagnose, but they just had a lot of maladaptive personality traits, which nobody likes to use the word narcissism anymore. Everybody's triggered over that, but it just describes a cluster of personality traits that show you that, you know,
Yeah,
number one, you just can't accept the feedback that you need, and you're not humble. It's like my humble clients, even if they love their letter, they go, "Oh, okay. Let's show me. What do you like? What don't you like?" And they're
yeah,
extremely receptive. The other kind, not so much. And I'm thinking that more and more I'm seeing more of these narcissistic traits. They call them in the reports. These psychological reports are going to diagnose, majority of eligible parolees are going to diagnose them as antisocial personality disorder. What
of
does that
course.
mean? Lacking empathy, callous toward others, using criminality as a means of coping with their reality and things like that. Narcissism is also, they also lack empathy, okay? And they also have this disregard, not necessarily for the rights of others, but for the feelings of other people. And so that is why these people that we represent get themselves into trouble. And it's extremely hard to point those traits out to them because of the narcissistic quality of, it's too damaging to their self-image. They think they've got it all figured out and they know what's going on. And so they're very difficult to talk to. And psychologists may or may not pick up on that. They usually just gravitate and say antisocial personality disorder, but they miss this bigger issue as to what's going on. So when I see a client with 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 parole hearings later, or he's just saying with a B number, B, telling me that he's just going to be who he is and that's good enough, and I am who I am, and you better just like me, and so on. And but
Hmm.
I'm not going to do what they want me to do to get out of here. I'm thinking, geez, I mean, that's pretty rough if you're so narcissistic that you can't just get out of your own way. And that is part of that disorder. They can't get out of their way. Some people with narcissistic traits can get out of their own way. But again, these are things that are going to come up in this meeting. And I find it extremely, unfortunately, I don't find them all that accurate. Sometimes they've missed things. Like I see my clients, like if they're not humble, and they can't give me victim impact at all because they lack complete empathy. They can't say, well, if I would walk a mile in the victim's shoes, number one, I felt pain by being hit in the back of the head. I felt shame when I had to go to the hospital and participate in a SART exam. I was scared to go to my house. I was depressed for days and days and days. They can't do it. They can only memorize and give you the list. And even then, they're just so callous. It's like, oh, well, I didn't murder them, so they're fine and stuff like that. That's part of the antisocial personality disorder as well. kind of going off on this rant, but basically this report is to gather facts, find these personality disorders that you need to say, okay, I have skills, tools, and I've done the work to heal from all the ways from my childhood that created this disorder or these disorders to begin with. And now I also have coping strategies to help me when these old childhood wounds pop up and trigger some sort of reaction in me of whatever nature that I will gravitate to this maladaptive personality trait and then say, here, panel, don't worry. I know I have an antisocial personality disorder. This is what will trigger that in the future to make me act in this way or that way. And this is the plan I have to override, which is my programming, which is probably not going to ever be unwired, potentially because it's organic. They've done studies on brains and they've seen the brain. It's still they see how the adaption can take place and where the maladaption is and stuff like that. So it just takes a real willingness, and that is what Joe said in many of his chapters, but most importantly, the first chapter again. But this report is very important. These psychologists only spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours if you're lucky. If they don't like you, less time, and they'll rely more on the central file if they don't like your crime. Some of these psychologists I find to be quite biased on some of the crimes, and I just think they should probably just recuse themselves from that particular type of crime, but they don't. And so, they try to get it right. They squeeze everybody into this checklist box, and I think it's probably more nuanced than they make it, but it's really important to bring your best foot forward to show I have this disorder. I recognize that I have this disorder, and here's what I've done to fix myself and to heal from the wounds that got me here to begin with. And so,
Yeah, also too, it's a lot comes down to their attitude. Like people who are ready for parole, they'll go in and they'll say, well, let's not say what they say on the record, but they have that attitude of, I did such and such. I really don't deserve a parole date. Those are the ones usually who are granted parole, because they're, I don't want to use the word compliant, but they follow the rules now and they've gotten with the program. They know that they're coming from a bad place and they're doing everything they can to change the person they are today. And they're preparing for the future. They're anticipating the stressors that they'll meet in society, and there'll be a lot of them especially when they put in a job application, and the new employer, even though they're not supposed to ask, at some point they're going to learn that this guy spent time in prison for a terrible crime. So, we're going to maybe let him go. Or worse, you try to apply for a professional license and that license is denied based on your past. And that's really hard for somebody who's sincerely trying to change their life and move on. And it's like those kind of things are, well, I don't have a description for it, but it's very negative. So they got to anticipate all these stressors. They don't even talk about the conflict they might have in their family, even though right now, yeah, they're missed. They want to get out. They want to come back. But the reality is life was not perfect before they committed their crime. In fact, it was very imperfect and very traumatizing. And they may not remember those things because they blocked them out because they miss their family so much. And I'm sure they do. But once they get back into the reality of being in the household and money's scarce or everybody has their dysfunctional personalities in their household, and push comes to shove, and they're being stressed out and wanting to go back to their old patterns of coping with alcohol or drugs, or so it's to stop. Hey, my past isn't perfect, I got to work on it. And it just so happens, by the way, I got to go to the psychologist at the meeting and show him who I am today. So there's a lot of things to address. And first thing is admitting it. And second thing is working on it to the extent of change. And it all comes out in this meeting with the psychologist, and then in the hearing. So I guess what I'm saying is all the change has to come before. And then when you go to the meeting, you have to show them what you've done to change. And it just can't be through a certificate or a chrono. Like you said, it has to be organic. It has to come from within. And another thing too is it's not just about, knowing and giving all the right answers. It's also about, like what I was saying the other week, you have to know not just the lyrics, but you got to have the music. You got to feel the beat. That music part that comes with knowing the words to say. It's both. You got to have the feeling of the music, and then sing the song.
100%, Joe. What
You,
we've covered this topic pretty well.
I was going to say about the report.
Ahead, please go for it.
Yeah. People always tell me if they're thinking about, well, like they like to say, postpone the hearing, which really means a waiver or a stipulation. But they want to go there to stipulate so they can get the recommendations of the commissioners, because for some reason they don't believe you or I. They got to hear it from the commissioners. So anyways, what they can do is get their report, their risk assessment, and at the end it gives recommendations of what you need to work on. I always have to point that out because they rarely seem to comprehend that the psychologist is telling them what they need to do, and this is a professional's opinion. So,
but like I said, once they get that input, they can't receive the input.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's right. They just get triggered by the input, by the feedback, by what they perceive as criticism, and then it's too much for their egos. And that's a pretty big, I use that in terms of A Course in Miracles, more ego, but like their self-image, okay, because their self-image depends on them believing that they are not flawed in any way, because that's too painful. There's just a lot of stuff going on there. And so they can't even, and then there's the other people that don't even read it. Like they just don't, like I send letters and they get the risk assessment, they get their did you read that? Yeah, I read it. Or did you read the book that you're supposed to read? Yeah, I read it. It's like Road to Freedom or whatever. It's like, no, did you really read it? Because I looked at that book the other day with a client who was, he needed some help. So we really covered, he wanted how to use the book to make a relapse prevention plan. So we spent the meeting doing that for him, is really looking at it. He had he's not DD, but he was a very low TAE, very low cognitive functioning. And I went through the book. I said, anybody could use this book, actually, anybody. And these people that come and they say, well, I can't use the book because it's only for child molesters. Like it's really not. Actually, there are some there are a lot of references here and there, but again, it's like, well, I'm not going to AA because I don't have an alcohol problem. I go, well, change the word alcohol to gang, change it to drugs, change it to gambling, change it to whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want,
Yeah.
and work the steps that way. And if you can't get past the stories in the group, just analogize, but that's extremely difficult. But I notice these clients, they can't read it because it's too triggering to their self-esteem, and they don't read it because, I don't know, lazy. I'm not sure exactly. It's like all of my clients that get out of prison, they read that report and read it again and read it again,
Yeah.
read the transcript, read it again and again and again, and they don't do the road to freedom one time. They do it again and
Thank
again
you.
and again. And
I know
those,
somebody at Avenal who did it 3 times and did the exercises each time. And by the way, he didn't even, his primary language was Spanish, but he got through it, and he addressed his defects and he was granted parole. Of course, it was
sit
sent back
down
for
with the
on bank,
dictionary.
but then
Yeah. It's always en banc, but that's okay.
on bank,
So,
I'm sorry.
um, I don't want to keep Joe past 10 because I already am imposing on him for showing up at 9 now. So I can do my Course in Miracles, 52-week Course in Miracles thing, which is still open, by the way, Joe, until September 1st.
That's fantastic.
If you want to join
Thank
in,
you. You know what? I'm not prepared today, but I
I'm just
gotta.
joking.
We'll be in touch about that. Okay. I'd love to just watch it. And by the way, where can the viewers? Is it going to be posted to
No, I
YouTube?
just put the link in. The Course in Miracles is a little on the deep side of the deep end of the pool for most people. Even for me, to be honest, I'm slowly, though it's weird, I'm 56 days in, and it's slow, very slowly today, and a couple of other times was like, oh wow, this is resonating a little bit. And now that but I'm so intellectualized that it's tricky. It's like trying to read the Bible as well. But
Mhm.
if you're an intellectual thinker, like I'm an analytical thinker, so it's more challenging for people like us rather than somebody who's a feeler. So, but I'm trying it, and I'm doing this course. It's called Transformation something or other. Transformation. I love transformation. So I
Mhm.
need it. I need it. Like I said, the
We
death of
all
my
do.
dog made me, it made me wake up. It's like your legs asleep. You're resting on I had it described like this. I say my legs were crossed. I felt fine. I felt fine, had no clue. And then I had to stand up and I realized, oh, my legs been asleep. And I feel like that has been the message through the death of Bruno. It
Mm.
was needed to wake me up. So I am about to embark on a lot of work. A
Okay.
lot of work. I'm going to be, I talked to another colleague the other day. She recommended some extremely valuable stuff. It's funny, you ask for help and it shows up in the
Mhm.
places that you were hoping it was going to show up in one place, and it's showing up in other places. So
Yeah.
disappointing on the one hand, but then all these other doors are opening on it,
See,
and that's the way life goes, right?
it sure
Joe,
does. We never know where the help's going to come from or what's going to change day to day, even moment to moment sometimes.
yeah, when the student's willing, the teacher appears or something like that.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
true.
somewhere along the line. So thank you again. I really appreciate you coming at 9 a.m. so I could do that course, Joe. And
Oh, of course, not a problem.
love your book. And not to cut you off so quickly, Strategy 16 next week. Know your hearing right. So maybe a little drier than most, but we'll always get talking about this and that.
Of
And
course, and the book can be purchased at Amazon.com. Just type in
thank
36
you.
Strategies
I
of
put the
Suitability.
link here
Oh,
in the
wow.
chat. I'm not sure if you guys will see the chat,
I see
but
it.
I'm
Mhm.
going to ask my amazing helper to add it to the notes that go underneath YouTube in case anybody does want to find it. It's
Mhm.
also easy to find. Amazon.com, type in 36 Strategies of Suitability. You see it written behind Joe there, and it comes up, and you'll see both editions there. So
Yes.
I think that even if you got the wrong edition, by the way, it's still fundamentally the same. Joe just cleaned up some things, as we all do as writers and editors. It's like, I think he saw some stuff he wanted to change it like we all do and said, oh man, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I would have had this thing, whatever. But you're going to get substantially the same. So if you do purchase the so-called wrong one, not the second edition, the newest edition, you're still going to be fine.
Just get the one with the nice cover.
Yeah, see this cover that's back there. So anybody that's watching, please, it's a really great book, really great. Everybody I know that has been granted parole and has used said, like Michael, I think he used this book. So
Wow.
it's an invaluable resource beyond just the how to kind of like a just what happens at the hearing. This is much more than that.
All right. Very good. All
We'll
right.
see you next week.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Please like, share, importantly, share
Mhm.
and subscribe. But a lot of people don't know people in prison, so it's hard to share. And you too. See you next week. Talk to you next week.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Always.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a
Good luck
have a
on
good
your
day.
book. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.